I don't want to open it up to see if it's
Please
used.
don't. I'm gonna.
But then part of me was
yak
like,
on
well,
this
is
table.
it used? I have to know.
Hey, Jason, how do you make that tissue dance?
You put a little in it.
But we're not boomers.
What if that's used? You just put your face on that.
Well, I didn't wash it.
Ugh.
It doesn't smell used.
Well, welcome to Bonus Features, our podcast where we go into the details we didn't quite have time to talk about on Sunday. My name is Caroline. I'm our host. I'm joined here by Pastor Jason, our resident expert,
Hello, everyone.
and Pastor Jeff, our lead pastor.
Always good to be here.
Hello, everyone. Well,
Whoa.
episode 2, season 6, talking about the book of Esther today.
Miss Esther.
I feel like you guys, similar to me, y'all probably done a whole lot of Bible studies around Esther, Ruth, those two, right? Those are really popular Bible
I feel
studies.
like
for
if
you
you
guys.
sign up for like a women's study or like
Yeah.
it's like, would you like to choose Ruth or Esther?
Yeah.
You got two options, or Rahab.
yeah. Less popular, but
Is this a bad girls of the Bible study or
that
a
is an
good
actual
girls?
one that we do. There
You
is
got to
that.
throw some Deborah in there if you're going there, because she was
Deb.
pretty baller.
Oh, Deb.
Good old Deborah. Oof, that's a name. Yeah. Esther.
Let's
Esther's
do
a
it.
good one.
It was a good one. It was fun.
I enjoyed that one.
I'm glad, as opposed to all the others that you had to just
Yeah,
basically
it's
tolerate.
actually a relief.
Oh, it's
that I
all coming
finally
out,
enjoyed one.
Caroline. It's all coming out.
Yeah. Well, I know that we were talking earlier this week. You were saying that you had just actually recently preached a message on Esther. So you were like, I don't know how I'm going to, but it felt to me at least, it felt different. I mean,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, for those of you that maybe are not familiar with us, Lifepoint Church, Wilmington, North Carolina. And if you are on our YouTube page and you go to a series called Flannel Graph Faith, which I had so much fun with that because if you're old, you grew up learning Bible stories on flannel graph. It was like high tech back in the day when in a low tech world. And so we taught this story there, but I actually got a chance to go deeper with all of it here in the book of Esther. So that was more focused on her becoming queen and, you know, the ins and outs of that. This, we went a little deeper like we do with Binge the Bible. So
Yeah. It was good. And it's one of those books that, you know, it only has 10 chapters. So you were able to really cover the whole thing, which is kind of,
yeah, we actually made it through 9. Well,
well,
8 and a couple verses.
made some change. That's all right.
Yeah. That's good for a Sunday, though.
I was cooking.
Yeah.
You know, here's what I found a lot of freedom in this. Most people, I mean, let me just ask, Pastor Caroline, if you're listening to a podcast, what speed are you listening to it at?
Oh, minimum 1.5.
Okay, so there you go. Minimum 1.5.
Yeah.
Most of us do that. So I should be able to speak at like 1.25, 1.5, so I can cover more ground in a shorter time period. And that's what it feels like when I'm doing these Binge the Bibles.
Yeah. That makes sense. I never really thought about like having to think about how fast you speak.
I remember in the early days when someone told me that I need to slow down speaking too fast. And I'm like, if I slowed down now, these would be an hour and a half.
Just tell them to listen faster.
Well, I must be like the only true Southerner in here, because I have to listen to it at real time.
Well, true.
I like it.
Southerner.
I like it.
So he actually put it at like 0.5.
You got to talk slow.
Literally said,
Have you ever, this
You
is
have
this
to
is
speak
fun.
slow when you talk to me. Please don't speak fast. You're going to leave me in the
Have you ever
dust.
listened to a podcast at half speed?
is that an option? I didn't even know
Oh,
it was
it's
an option.
completely an option.
Stop.
Everybody sounds drunk. It's hilarious.
Over they're from Columbus County.
Absolutely.
Same thing.
I say that because I'm
Hilarious.
from Columbus County. Please don't get offended.
Yeah, you can't get mad because he's one of you.
Oh, come on. I have to find our...
Be careful what you pull up. Our producer's going to have to edit out this
but
podcast.
thank you guys for making me feel a little more isolated as a Southerner because
I
of
am
my
literally
slow
from
speech.
here.
You are, but I don't know. You've kind of like accrued some ways that aren't Southern.
Okay, I've never been more offended.
Acquired, I should
Okay,
say.
ready?
But essentially, he spoke to the entire nation that used to be of Israel. And a real quick history lesson.
Okay, now unfair, because that is Pastor Kevin, who does have a southern...
Wait, is that that's Pastor Kevin?
You couldn't
That's
tell?
Pastor Kevin. Unfortunately. Okay.
Oh, that actually made me feel like I was at a
Wait,
family
that's
reunion.
So funny. I was like, that's some. Never mind.
Yeah, made me feel like I was.
Never mind. I
That made
wanna
me
keep
feel
it.
right at home.
I'm not I'm not letting you experience this blessing, which makes me kind of have two thoughts. One is
Just you can just see me just.
Oh man.
I love you.
Oh, now you have. I'm going to listen to every podcast like that, and I'm never going to get any smarter.
Wow.
Oh man, that was
I learned something new today. We can go home. That was
Mission
my
accomplished.
lesson for the day.
Thank you, Pastor Jeff.
Oh.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
I honestly have no idea.
So, Pastor Jeff, you were saying we had the opportunity with this because you speak so fast. We get to go a little deeper. And so, speaking of deeper, this is a really good book to kind of take a little off of our normal theological course. And I'd love to get your perspective because I know this is for me. I'm really conservative when it comes to pulling things out of the Bible, following the Bible. Like I believe if it happened from Genesis 1 to Revelation, like it's true. Like it happened. I'm a really conservative guy when it comes to interpreting the Bible. But Esther is one of those that I've always had questions. Even before I really got into the Bible, I had questions. Even questions like I hate that Esther had to go and spend a night with the king. Like that bothered me. Because it's just inappropriate, and it wasn't part of their culture. It wasn't how she was raised.
Are you assuming that things?
I'm assuming that
in the movie One Night with a King,
she just laid at the foot of the bed, right?
and then they spent the night. I don't think that's what happened.
They had to redeem that love.
So here's okay. So I know you're getting ready to go somewhere. So put a pin in that real quick. But I think a lot of times, and I was challenged with this as I was studying. We see this story as this like godly woman and her godly uncle. But I got to push back, and I'm not trying to I don't want to insert
And that's actually
things.
where I kind of wanted to go to.
Okay, I don't want to insert things that aren't there, but if they're really that godly, why are they still in Babylon?
Exactly.
Why didn't you go home? What if they are casually committed to this faith of their forefathers? And for Mordecai to be okay with his niece to go sign up, I mean, again, we're not told that the king slept with all of these women. But we are told the king gets what the king wants. I just don't think he's like, it's just companionship. Yeah. I'm looking for someone with a great personality. I'm looking for somebody that, we have
walks in the desert.
Yeah, long walks in the desert.
Maybe a round of Scrabble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got to be into board games. I just don't think that was the case. So the fact that she was okay with this, that he was okay signing her up for this, to me it just makes me go, there's enough that I am thinking I could submit. I don't think they were as sold out as our Sunday school stories have made them seem.
Yeah.
The women's Bible
fact,
studies are not going to like
well,
that.
and even my question is even how devout were they even in private? Because we know when Daniel, Prophet Daniel, when he was there, he was devout and he was outspoken. We see in here a lot of people until Mordecai let people know who he was, they didn't know that he was Jewish. And the same with Esther. They changed her name from her original name to Esther to hide the fact that she was Jewish, and she had to reveal that she was Jewish to the king. So to me, I think there's a lot that kind of goes with what you're saying, Pastor Jeff. But
Again, could be wrong.
yeah, but it also that is why I mean, I don't know, just from my experiences in college and even studying since then, the majority of the scholars that I follow, they definitely affirm Esther in the canon. They don't really question a lot, and I would never question source validation or anything like that when it comes to the Bible, because I do believe it's the inerrant Word of God. Everything is there for a reason. But some people have raised the question, it's kind of funny that you've got a book like Esther in there when there is no mention of God, really. Prayer.
They fast.
They do fast, which is a great picture. But then there's not even any New Testament affirmation. Like, there's no mention of Esther in the New Testament. Like, nobody quotes it because, Jesus and the apostles, they quote it all, like the Bible all the time.
You'd like to think maybe Hebrews 11 she'd show up.
Yeah, like somewhere. But she's not. And so it is kind of peculiar. It's kind of funny. To me, it's like it's a healthy something to talk about, because we do, Pastor, I've heard you say this before, if it's in here, it's there for a reason. And so it honestly made me want to study Esther a little harder this time around, just to really get maybe more of what God's got in there. Because I do think, I think it's an awesome study for women. I love the books that I've read on Esther before, but I do think when we take it as just the story of Esther in one night with the king, I think we miss a much deeper story that God wanted to tell.
Yeah, this is probably more like Bachelor in Paradise than.
What do you know about Bachelor in Paradise?
Because I watched The Bachelor.
Okay.
So I see the previews for it.
Oh,
I see the
okay.
commercials for it. I wouldn't watch that trash.
And my kids have informed me that they're not called commercials anymore. They're ads.
Oh.
And they called me a boomer.
When did that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. But my kids called me that, and then they called me a boomer. I'm not a boomer, but they call me a boomer because I refer to them as commercials and not ads.
Well,
That just hurt my brain.
yeah, I was like, I don't know how to handle that, but
So let's start with let's talk about this for just a minute. I introduced this idea at the start of the Esther message, trying to establish some context. I had never done a lot of digging on historically what was happening at the time. The fact that the Xerxes' father, which I had always referred to as Darius, okay,
Yeah.
Darius,
which is Darius.
Darius.
Like the country singer.
Then I went looking up in the pocket pronunciation guide.
You mean the Hootie the Blowfish singer?
Darius Rucker. Oh, no.
Darius Rucker.
He is the country singer,
No,
Darius Rucker.
Get out of here. He's Hootie.
God redeemed his
Is
talent.
pronounced Darius.
Darius.
Darius? Is there a Darius here?
I kind of like that better,
Darius.
honestly.
Balake?
Yeah, Aaron. Anyway, so when we start off, Darius is the king. What's happening is the Greeks are beginning to try to take some of his territory, so he marches his army, ends up getting defeated, and passes away. His son, Xerxes, takes over, which Xerxes is the Persian name. Does anybody know his Hebrew name?
I can't say this like a house or something. A how? Is that right?
It's-
A house arrest?
House arrest?
A house arrest.
It's a house arrest.
Is that right?
Okay, so Caroline, you read this one for us.
Oh, sweet.
It's by where my thumb is at.
Ahasuerus.
I got a bad case of Ahasuerus.
Yeah.
Close.
You.
Not really.
I
I can see the letters.
Iris.
I just can't say the word.
Ahasuerus. The E's are both italic. I'm not the smartest, but I don't know that that's what I would go by either. Ahasuerus.
Yeah, you notice I didn't even play with that name
Yeah.
in the message. So Xerxes. So here's what never made sense to me before. I mean, I just thought he likes to party. Like, I'm Xerxes and I like to party. Because he's throwing this 6-month party, but he's doing it because he's going to go back and he wants to build an army. And the way you build an army is you need to recruit all the surrounding leaders, generals to come. And they're coming to the party and they're buying into him and they're impressed with everything that he has. And so he's getting them on board, which is what the purpose of the 6-month party was. He's building this army so that he can go back and hopefully conquer the Greeks. And, of course, it's at that party that it wraps up, and then he's got the 7-day banquet, which it says, so the party was nobles and leaders. The 7-day banquet was least to the greatest. And the idea was these are the people that helped host the party. So he's throwing an after party for everybody, open bar. It said that, that literally they were encouraged to drink without restriction. The wine was abundant. And I guess they got to this point where they were told the servants, in verse 8, serve each man what he wished. So literally like another round for the boys. And so they were getting quite hammered. And it says in verse 10, on the 7th day when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs. And I love these guys' names. Okay, so he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagatha, Zethar, Carcass. Hey, Bigtha.
Hey, Bigtha.
Bigtha.
I feel like Jason grew up with a big.
Go get Vashti. He was like, Bigtha.
So he was at half
He was
speed.
a 0.5 speed for sure.
And she says no. Queen Vashti
Which is
refused to
fair.
come. Then the king became furious. And he burned with rage. And that's when he was consulted to, like, you need to get rid of her because this is a bad look. And if your wife can do this to you and she's the queen, my wife's going to do this to me. And so anyway, they issued this decree that so that there'd be no disrespect and discord. So they end up doing away with Vashti, and that wraps up chapter 1. And the reason I was going through these battles is because chapter 2, it says, later when King Xerxes' fury had subsided. I initially read that and interpreted it like he was so mad at this of being denied that like when that finally cooled down. Well, Esther doesn't record everything that happened historically, and what actually happened was that there were technically 2 battles. The battle of, the name just slipped my mind. Hang on one second. It is I'm going to say it wrong. Hang on. The battle of, hold on, I got my notes. So the battle of Thermopylae, which was 300 men led by Leonidas, which was kind of cool because that's when people are like, wait a second, I think I've seen this
I watched
movie.
that.
Which was 300.
We are.
Again, yeah, epic. I remember
Such a
seeing
good
that and I was
movie.
like, I've got to start working out. I got to get it
I think that's
together.
what got everybody on the CrossFit train.
I think that was where CrossFit came from.
That's what got me on the Gerard Butler train, I think.
Truth.
Just saying.
I feel like you speak truth.
So the Spartans fought valiantly but end up getting defeated. And then Persia goes down into Athens to find it vacated. They go after them in the boats and they get defeated. So when chapter 2 says his fury has subsided, why is he mad? Well, yeah, there's the events of chapter 1, but I think he's moved on. It's that he built this huge military and they got destroyed again.
Yeah.
And so that changes the context just a little bit. So then when his guys, I'm over here trying to scroll my Bible. Scrolling. For those of you that are not watching this, I was literally swiping my finger up the page of my Bible, and it didn't scroll. It's crazy.
See, this is how technology takes over the world.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what led to his personal attendants going, hey, we think we know what will cheer you up. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of women, and you get your pick. And so that's just as interesting, like to know that was happening at the same time, to me makes this go from like, oh, this is a sweet story of this Esther and the glass slipper, which has nothing, there's no slippers in this story.
That's
But now
Cinderella.
you're like, oh, this was an actual, these are historical documented battles, and this story is happening
Yeah.
during this. And it's also, if you wanted to, you could go and piece this story together. I believe Ezra, I think it's Ezra chapter 6 and 7 is where the story of Esther would fall right in that. And Pastor Caroline, I see you nodding your head. If you want to expound on that just a little bit.
I would. But I know you're on a roll, so I just want to make sure. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
You were
Just
like, that's right.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Everyone knows that.
But if you were to read Ezra 6 and 7, that's where this story would fall right in there, which makes me ask a question. I'll turn to our resident nerd for this one. Why?
Thank you for that appropriate title, PJ. I like that one a little bit.
Trying to go back to
You wear it
expert,
well.
but-
So why is it that Esther is on page 426 in my Lifepoint Bible, but then last week we were talking about Haggai, which was like 800 and something? Why are they like same time period yet so far apart?
But isn't it because this book is more important and they go from important to least important?
That was a bummer of your Malachi.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's because and that's actually to me that's why it fits as one of the books that we've taken into the canon still is because some of the language you've already been talking. How many times did you say the number 7? Like it shows up a lot, and so in most Old Testament books, when you start seeing that, you're like, oh, it's a prophetic book. Nope, this one's not prophetic at all. And so that drives even the historical narrative. And so because of where it falls, aside from the fact that it's got, more chapters, which is, remember, the big difference between major and minor prophets, but it speaks to a historical narrative. It's actually like, I know I'm not a scholar. That's why I like the term nerd better than expert, because I feel like there's more forgiveness in the term nerd. But, I mean, most scholars believe that it would have been Mordecai, Ezra, or even Nehemiah that actually wrote Esther. Personally, I do believe that Ezra had a little something to do with it, just because of the historical narrative, and because of where it falls. But it was something that was readily accepted into the Jewish canon, like into the Tanakh and all that.
Right. So I think what's neat is Ezra is about rebuilding the temple.
Yeah.
Right. So exiles rebuild the temple. Nehemiah rebuild the wall.
Yeah.
You needed a wall around the city that distinguished you from your neighbors. It protected you from them. So Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, we have to remember, life is still happening in Babylon. Mm-hmm. And what's happening in Babylon is about to have an influence across not only the citadel of Susa, but literally the face of the earth. And Esther ends up going to bat for her people And so that's where that story falls. So
Yeah.
it's the same story. Haggai, if you remember, was get back to work. So here's a minor prophet telling them, you guys started building the temple, and then you stopped, and the wall needs to get redone, which actually happens later. But Haggai was like, get back to work. So if you caught last week, they started the temple, quit after 2 years. It sat dormant for about, I think, like 14 or something
14,
like that.
yep.
And then they got back to work. So Esther, it falls right in there, but it takes us to Babylon to be able to understand what was happening there.
Yeah.
And I just think it's neat that while God's people were in God's promised land in Jerusalem, that his presence was still at work even in Babylon.
Yeah. Because it's like he was working on the places, but somebody had to be working on the people.
That'll preach. Places and people.
Yeah. He
Did you know
prepared a
that
place.
The P words are preachers' favorite, like alliterations.
Why?
Just listen. I do it all the time. I don't even think about it. There's just more like there's power in the presence, the power of prayer. He's about the people and the places. There's just so many P words.
Pastor, when you were in college, and I don't know if you had what your communicating scripture class or classes would have been, but did they encourage you to find words like that for your points?
I don't remember that.
We were just talking about like the transition from college to like real life, but
I'll tell you,
I know it's a blur.
I blame Twitter. Early days of Twitter, which is now X.
140 characters. Yeah, people are like,
140
what's Twitter?
140 characters. You had to figure out how to say it in 140 characters. You learned to be tight with your verbiage, and which is why I even struggle with point number 1 today, where it was don't make permanent decisions when you're temporarily delusional. It still probably fits, but it just felt long.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to tighten it up. But anyway, I like tight little phrases. And it's Twitter.
That's probably why I didn't do Twitter. I can't say anything that short
That's why they're resident
or
nerd.
fast.
Yeah.
So let's get back at it. We were on chapter 2, and we took a little hiatus just to explain why Esther's where she is in the Bible with these history books and not the minor prophet that we just saw of Haggai. And so when we get to chapter 2, we find out that she gets chosen, apparently whatever she did to win the favor of the king. I'll let you guys draw your own conclusions.
According to VeggieTales, she sang a song.
It doesn't say anything about her having a good voice, but it does say she had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Girl was easy on the eyes.
Ding, ding, ding.
So, but again, she did not reveal her nationality, her family background. Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. So the idea is, and I didn't mention this in the message, but the idea is that because of her position when she became queen, she actually got Mordecai a position at the king's gate. The initial thought I have is that he's just chilling by the gate, like just, sitting by
Me
the
too.
gate. Like you
a
ain't have
scrub.
nothing better to do.
Yeah.
But he was actually in a position for the palace at the king's gate. And so because of that, that's why he had constant exposure to Haman, and Haman was so irritated. He saw him all the time. He was there serving in some capacity, but would not honor him. So anyway, just a little sidebar on good old Mordecai.
A.K.A. Paul Grape.
I haven't watched VeggieTales in a long time.
Yeah, I missed.
So I don't know how
all
much you guys want to go into chapter 2. That's where she had 12 months of beauty treatments. That's impressive. 12 months.
Spa days.
6
Spa days
months
for days.
with oil of myrrh.
Literally.
Oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics.
I have so many questions.
Well, then let's just read it.
So, and part of this, like, well, Pastor, if you want to read it, we can kind of talk through it after.
So 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics, and this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was not in charge
Wait,
of the
I'm
concubines.
sorry, what?
Eunuchs. So she would then go to a separate part. So the harem was kept in one part of the palace. Then you went to be with the king. And then after being with the king, you went to another part where you were now placed with the concubines. Okay, so here's another thing that people don't realize. If she doesn't get picked, it's not like she goes back home. It's not like, all right, Mordecai, didn't work out. I'll just get myself a husband. No, she's now she's cared for by the palace, but she's never to marry.
Yeah.
And so the rest of her life, she's not going to have a husband. And so she She's placed with the concubines, and then we're told she can't return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, when it was her turn to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, not to be confused with Haggai, okay? Two different guys. She took what this eunuch recommended, and we're just told she won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king was attracted to her more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. That's what happened.
Yep. And we got to remember, like, how appalling, however appalling that is, that women would be put aside and seen as basically the king's property. If we really look at kings and kingdoms of that day, this was pretty normal, especially when it came to Persia, Babylon, because they weren't just seen as kings; they were the king of kings.
Right.
They were seen as gods, and so all were the kings, and so everyone lived in service of this particular king, even other kings. And part of all that process was so that they could be made pure and acceptable to be in front of the king. And I will say, this isn't even part of like some of my study, but wouldn't it, if we really kind of zoom, because most of the Bible tells the story of the Bible. Everything in the Old Testament is ultimately pointing to Jesus and some of the foreshadowing, especially when it comes to the protection of his people. It's just kind of funny that you have Esther, who was probably the only Jewish woman in the lineup, but we kind of get to see a glimpse of how God probably saw the Jewish people with other people, and eventually how he would see his children and how special they were, and knowing them by name, because God knows every hair on our head, knows us by name. And so it's just kind of funny looking at it. That's not in this book. It just kind of gave me a quick picture, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. That's cool.
I also, in my studies, I found that one of the reasons that they had 12 months of beauty treatments was to also ensure that the women were, in fact, virgins and not pregnant.
Ooh.
Oh, that makes sense.
That way,
they should do that for the
I thought you were
Bachelor.
going to say because they're really ugly. That's what I thought you were going to say. I don't know why.
that girl needs 12 months.
Yeah.
More myrrh.
Yeah, your way makes more sense. Maybe both, though. I don't know.
So then at the end of 2, so I've always just seen this as a story of Esther, but I really like the sub-story of Mordecai foiling this plot to assassinate King Xerxes. Like, he hears about it, he tells Esther, she tells the king, they investigate, find out it's true, and then the people that were going to kill the king actually get impaled on poles, which was a Persian thing. So we've often taught that crucifixion is a Roman thing. Impaling is very similar. They would basically picture a spike, and they would put your body up, and they would ram it down on there. And so it was a form of crucifixion. Now, what they invented, eventually the Romans perfected. But that was, so we see Mordecai kind of doing a little bit of like protecting the king here, and then that comes back around later to play my favorite role in the entire story. And I said that during the message. We'll get there. I think it's chapter 6 when we get there. But then, chapter 3, again, unpack this. Haman can't stand Mordecai because Mordecai won't bow down to him. Like, come on, Haman. Get over yourself. Mm-hmm. So he's going to kill all of the Jews. Like, might have
pretty
an
extreme
problem. Like, he needs a little anger management. I'm going to kill you and all your people.
He just needs a Snickers.
Yeah.
Have you eaten in a while?
Yeah.
I do think it's funny that, and this may even go to like the establishment of the particular festival at the end of the book. Kind of goes hand in hand with most people outside the Jewish nation or Jewish people don't really reference or know a lot about it. But, we always talk about Hitler. We always talk about Pharaoh and people that have tried to take out the Jews through history. Haman's not really mentioned in that group, but he's just as evil.
Right, and that's why I even said in the message, before there was a Hitler, there was a Haman. Mm-hmm. And this is a little just stop and pause, but it should not shock us that there has been a constant threat to the Jewish people, to the nation of Israel. And even in our world today, we got a lot of drama going on, and God promises to protect his people. I will supernaturally protect you. That was the covenant he made with Abraham. Yep. Mm-hmm. And even in there, we see it here in this moment, even in the disobedience of God's people, we still see his preservation. Yep. And I think there's a reason that such a small place like Israel comes under such attack and yet comes out victorious. Yeah. It's really interesting to me.
So with Haman walking through. Now, here's where as a kid, even if we throw back to flannel graph faith, this is where the story of Esther started getting a little muddy to me as a kid, because you've got, Mordecai foils the plot of the assassins, and then Haman develops his hatred of Mordecai, and in turn the rest of the Jewish nation. And then you've got all these events, but it's always been weird to me that you've got all of this happens, but then Mordecai is honored, and everything is still in place. The order of events has just always been kind of crazy to me. And so, Pastor, I didn't know if, through your study, if you had, if this order started to make even more sense, or how you align it, or, telling through the story. Because it's just kind of weird. It's always it feels like some stops and starts. And
I don't know. I feel like it's multiple events happening that are overlapping. You've obviously got the Mordecai, and this is a 10-year time period that we're covering. We read it, and it feels like, and then the next day, and then the next day, and by the end of the week, all of this has unfolded, and it is. It's 10 years, and so you got to imagine, trying to kind of live this out, because what I wrote in my Bible in Exodus chapter 3, down near the bottom of my page 428 in the Lifepoint Bible, where, let's see, this is verse 13. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the orders to destroy, kill, annihilate the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day. So all of this is supposed to happen in one day. One day we're wiping out all of them, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. And I wrote in the side of mine, see chapter 9, verse 1, because that's when we come back and discover that, on that day, God miraculously turns the tables. And I love that Scripture even says that, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. So I think all of this stuff, it's overlapping, these events. Some of them are unfolding at the same time. How long it took for the decree to be placed, and then Mordecai hears about it, and he tells Esther, you got to go to the king, and she's like, I can't go to the king. Nobody goes to the king. And, she ends up going because she's like, you guys fast and pray. I don't know how much time transpired between all of that.
And I guess the way I've started reconciling in my mind is just the red tape of government, and that this government was huge. A lot of people, a lot of officers in the government, a lot of people that the king had to respond to, and not nearly as many people. And it's why he had to go back through the scrolls to remember people's names and situations and things, just like we see when he does end up rewarding Mordecai. It's just a big government, and I think that's something that we don't really take into consideration a lot. Is just how vast it was and how many things that were probably happened. But also, I take it even telling the story of my life, things aren't always aligned like I think they are, and things happen. God's faithfulness is still there, and His story is still being told, even though mine feels choppy. So there's just a lot of ways that I try to reconcile. But I just remember as a kid, it always kind of seemed funny, and now as an adult, it's still I'm still trying to repair my flannel graph faith. It seems like.
Well, I like when you continue reading, you get into chapter 4, which we've been talking about, with Mordecai trying to recruit Esther, and Mordecai says something that tells me that he's not ignorant to the history of his people. Again, I asked the question, what's he doing in Babylon? But when he says to Esther in verse 14, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. So he knows God is going to keep His word. He's a covenant-keeping God. Life may get really rough. You and your father's, you're going to perish, but God is still on the throne, and this isn't going to thwart His plans. So I just think that's impressive that Mordecai, he kind of reached in for that, okay, God has never failed. Yeah. And He will still deliver, and I have no clue how, but I'm still trusting Him. And then she responds with okay, you fast, and I'll go. And if I perish, I perish, which just a strong line from Queen Esther.
Yeah, 4:14 is actually my favorite verse of this book. Just for the reminder that we have the opportunity to say yes. Are we going to take it or not? And
good word.
I don't feel like I've ever been as brave as she has been, but I would like to say yes.
So something I don't understand, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on it. So you have the king and the queen, and she can't come to him unless he requests her. That's weird.
Yeah, I think so.
And she hasn't been requested in 30 days. And so I just got to take the scriptures at its word, but she's like, if I go and he doesn't extend the scepter, like, do you think that I wonder if was she like, almost like, I don't want to do this? Like, you kind of make up like reasons, well, I'm not allowed in there. And I mean, because when she shows up in chapter 5, when he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her. You kind of are given the impression from her that, like, hey, he might kill me on the spot. But he sees her, he's pleased with her, and he held out the gold scepter that was in his hand, and the king said, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom will be given to you. So here he sounds like why was she ever nervous?
He sounds like, because he's a huge red flag. He's like, he definitely could have just been like, nah. I think that's I don't know. I totally get that. Like, that makes sense to me that he could just be like, nah, she doesn't please me today.
And it does show you how much that she doesn't know him. And in my mind, I'm like, with all those women, and it's only been 30 days, that's not bad. Like, yeah. She's probably seen him way more than most of the other women have. And
you think the other women still saw him after he chose her as a wife?
The realistic,
you think he had
the realistic side of me is like, absolutely,
side piece.
Because that's what kings did then.
Well, it said the harem was in the castle, right? Like, why else would it be in the castle?
Now that you've chosen me, I need you to no more choosing from the harem.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that feels like...
He said up to half the kingdom. He didn't say be ridiculous.
Yeah.
So chapter 5 is where we've got Esther making the request for a banquet. You and Haman come join me at the banquet. And they're at the very first banquet. And he's like, all right, what's your request? She's like, I'd love to do this again. It's such a good time. Let's have another banquet. And so when they're leaving, we're told this about Haman in verse 9. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and he went home. So he calls his friends and his wife, and he boasts to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, all the ways the king honored him and how he's elevated him. It's like, Haman is such a fan of Haman. And it says, and that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Vashti invited to accompany the king along to the banquet. But all of this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting on the king's gate. He's like, man, I am literally so blessed. I am so successful and wealthy, and I have all of these sons, but all of that means nothing if that Mordecai is just still, spitefully not bowing to me. Like, I just picture him, he's pouting.
It's like the guy that works at your local grocery store that you just, like, hate his guts because he, like, is so mean to you or whatever, and that guy, like, has no idea you exist.
Right. But I love it. He's like, I can't get no satisfaction.
Yeah.
And so his wife, Zeresh, and all the friends said, have a pole set up reaching to the height of 50 cubits, which I think is 75 feet. Can we just talk about this? It's a massive gallows. Have it set up and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. For crying out loud, quit complaining about this and do something. Kill him. Have fun at the banquet.
Yeah.
Love you. See you later.
Yeah, it would ruin the party if you don't impale this guy on a 7-story gallows situation. So
yeah, so the footnote in my Bible says that is about 75 feet or about 23 meters.
Jeez.
Build me a gallows bigger, higher. Like, how do you even get him up there?
The guy's building and you're like,
what you doing with that pole?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so the note in my translation here says, assuming a standard length for the cubit about 18 inches, this would be about 75 feet, which is a surprisingly tall height for the gallows. Perhaps the number assumes the gallows was built on a large supporting platform or a natural hill for visual effect, in case the structure itself may have been considerably smaller.
I would not deny that Haman is like, hear ye, bow or be impaled.
Yeah. He's giving major Lord Farquaad vibes. Like, he's just like, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So that leads to my favorite chapter, which is 6. And I just wrote the irony and the timing on the side of my Bible, because this is when the king's trying to sleep, because they got the big party tomorrow. King can't sleep. And so he's like, go get me a scroll, which is like kind of like the newspaper. And I want to read about the historical events.
Pastor, and what do you call that, by the way? The sleep when he couldn't sleep?
Oh, I think I called it holy insomnia.
That's
or
it.
divine
Yep.
insomnia.
Yep.
Like, I think God kept him up.
I love that. I love it.
So maybe the next time you can't sleep, be like, God, what is it? What is it? Go get you a history book. And so they read him this story about Mordecai finding out about this plot to assassinate him. You can imagine if you're the king, you're like, well, hey, what did we ever do for that guy? And they're like, nothing. We did nothing. And he's like, oh, I need some counsel. Hey, who's out there in the court? And they're like, oh,
This guy's staring at a 75-foot pole. You want him?
yeah. David, what you building out there?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. So quick question. And I love that Haman is literally coming for permission to kill Mordecai, and the king is like, what would you do for somebody that deserves the highest of honors?
And Haman's like,
Haman is so self-inflated, and he's just like, oh, well. And I love that it's like he thought that the king was referencing him, so he's like, man, get a robe. How about a robe that you actually wore? Go get me your robe, and then your horse that you've ridden, and then I want the horse to be adorned, and I think this guy should be, this guy should be paraded around. And I love that the king is basically like, that is a wonderful plan.
let's
and
do
Haman is
that.
like getting all giddy, and then he says, do just as you suggested for Mordecai the Jew. You know Mordecai? You know Mordecai,
Yeah.
the guy that's at the gate?
He said,
He's
for
like,
who?
I heard of him.
Run that by me again.
Dang it. So I love that he had to do this, all of this, for Mordecai. And then verse 12, after Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief. I just think he fell on the bed, and his wife's like, how'd it go? Not so good. Why me? Why nothing goes my way? All I wanted to do was impale the guy, not parade the guy. But it's just a great. That's why I said that's my favorite chapter. I don't even, the stuff about Esther. That's fine, but
yeah.
you just call this the Book of Mordecai. I like that better.
That is pretty awesome.
It's great, and it leads to,
then
even the
his
culmination.
wife. I didn't get to say this. This is the bonus features. So he's home. He's bawling on his bed, crying. His wife's like, oh, pull it together.
Yeah.
And it says his advisors and his wife said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. It's like, this was your idea, woman.
Yeah.
You told me to do this.
She's like, I didn't tell you to do
While
nothing.
they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrive, and
There
they
they are
bring him
again.
away to the banquet.
Yeah.
Party time.
It's
like,
party time.
he had splashed some water
Yeah.
on his face.
Look
pulled
alive,
himself
brother.
together, And then they get to the dinner when the king's like, all right, what is it, Esther? And she's like, okay, my people are going to be completely murdered. And the king's like, who would do such a thing? And she points to Haman, who's just like, me?
Moi?
What? Never.
No.
So anyway, and he ends up getting impaled on his own gallows. You played yourself.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yikes.
So, Pastor, have you heard? I mean, I've heard a few guys mention it through the years, just other sermons and stuff. We're not even in sermons, more of like through teaching. But they say that this is part of the foreshadowing in the New Testament, because just like Haman intended for destruction on all the Jewish people, on basically symbolized through a gallows that he created, and then the Lord in turn used that to destroy him, and it's foreshadowing of Jesus with the cross. The cross was intended to destroy Jesus, but in fact it was the tool of our salvation.
Okay. I can see that. So, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face, like they bagged him, hauled him off.
Black site,
Yeah.
put him in the back of a van.
Impaled him on the pole. And that was all well and good, but the problem's still not solved. Because you got to remember, the edict has gone out. The decree is out there. 127 provinces are all planning on this one particular day to murder all the Jews. Mm-hmm. So now they got to reverse that, which is not an easy thing to do. Because, I mean, could you imagine if, like, the courier who's riding the fastest horses, like, got delayed, like, arrived the next day? He's like, I have a new decree. And they're like, too late. Yeah. So, I mean, when I talk about God kind of like coming down to the wire, We look at it like he's late or he's pushing it, and God's like, no. I'm on time, always on time. And we see that right there out of chapter 8. And so one of the verses that I thought was kind of neat. So verse 11 says, the king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate. Remember, that was the edict against them. Now it's the edict for them. They can defend themselves, destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the province of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. So basically, hey, the day that you're going to get murdered and destroyed is actually the day that you're going to overpower. Then a copy of the text was issued as law in every province, made known to the people, every nationality, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves against their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. And for Jews, we're told that when Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing the royal garments. Remember, this is the royal garments. Thank you, Haman, for suggesting this. These are nice. He's wearing the royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness, and honor. And it says, in every province and every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Then you get into chapter 9, and you find that 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict goes out. And I love this part of verse 1 that says, now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. That's my God.
Yeah.
That does that.
Yeah.
How the turntables. Love it.
I love it. And, I mean, even into establishing a festival. And I think we talked about this word before, Pastor. Is it Purim or Purim? How do you say that?
I think it's Purim.
Purim?
I don't know. Let me see if it's in my book.
When you type it in your iPhone, it autocorrects to Putin. So,
I think that's it.
yeah, I don't think that's right, but
I'm not seeing the correlation there, but
I was taking notes earlier, and I was like, oh.
Purim.
Purim.
Like pew pew. P-E-W. Pew. Rim. Or is it
Purim.
Purim. Purim.
Purim.
Pure. Yep. So they have this festival, and they celebrate it to remember how God, his sovereignty, protected and preserved them. And you'll find that Mordecai grows. His reputation spreads. He grows and becomes more powerful. I'm trying to think of a few things that I didn't get a chance to talk to. We get we're told that in, let's just go from here. Verse 5 of chapter 9, the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon. These names are tricky. The 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This is interesting. They're like, we're not here to monopolize. So they didn't touch the plunder. They just killed the people that were trying to kill them. And so his sons get killed. Now, I want to take a minute before we bury Haman to introduce just a thought. As I was studying, I realized something, and I thought this was interesting. So Haman is an Agagite. All right? So that's he's from Amalek. Interesting thought. Just actions have consequences. If you were to go all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 15, you have Saul, and Saul was instructed to kill all the Amalekites, but he didn't. He didn't kill all the Amalekites. Haman is a descendant of Amalek. He's an Agagite, which comes from the Amalekites. Well, if Saul had done what God instructed, there would be no Haman. So it's just interesting that the battle that's happening here has gone back for generations, but if they had wiped out the Amalekites, I wonder if this story would have played out different. Kind of makes you wonder, what consequences are we dealing with today that had somebody done their job back then? Like, how is my obedience today setting up the future generations in a good way or a bad way? Am I allowing things today, like Saul allowed the Amalekites, some of them to live? Am I allowing things today that my kids are going to, like battles they're going to have to fight tomorrow?
Yep.
Definitely something worth
Noodling on for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've mentioned that in our Brotherhood. We've even had that in some of the books that we read through in Brotherhood. Is like, what are we allowing in our families that we could, God's given us the tools and the focus to kill today, but we're allowing it to go on because the sins of the fathers will follow.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Last thing I'll say on chapter 9, I think, says, verse 16, meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar. Again, that's the day. And on the 14th, they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. And so you'll continue to find that they assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th, they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. And then you see the establishing in verse 20, the establishing of Purim. Purim.
Yeah. I do love that Mordecai in what is it? I keep forgetting the name, and we've said it like 10 times. Susa, yeah. He was known as Mordecai the Jew. I love that because he had revealed that early on, and he just kind of and the reason to me that's a big deal is because he was on the king's gate. He was known as Mordecai the Jew, but you can also see even through this ordinance from the king, like conflicting ordinances now, like there had to have been so much tension in these provinces where it came to the Jews, and that's why some of them kept quiet, some didn't, because it was pretty volatile.
Right.
I'd never really put that into perspective until now.
Well, and what you read when you start reading the closing of chapter 9, you find that when Haman was trying to determine what day the Jews were going to be, he was going to have them destroyed, he cast lots, the Purim, the pure, and he cast that, and it fell on that day. And so now a day that was supposed to kill them is now a day of celebration, and on this day they read the account of Esther to remember what God has done. To me, what a great way to commemorate.
Yeah.
I do think that one of the things that you notice about Jewish culture is they celebrate feasts and festivals as commandments of God. Mm-hmm. God commands them to celebrate, because what you fail to celebrate, you'll fail to remember, and you will not pass on. And so this becomes something that they do all the time. And then the book ends with chapter 10, which is the greatness of Mordecai. And so King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and goes on to talk about the greatness of Mordecai. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add on that, but
I just love that it even shadows the story of Joseph in Egypt, with Joseph being held up to second in command under Pharaoh, and now you see kind of the same thing with Mordecai being second in command to the king. I mean, it's just kind of cool how God plays stories out, and it's such a good reminder. And even the takeaways from the message, Pastor, they were such good takeaways and reminders for what the ultimate story, because like I said at the beginning of this, and just through this discussion, I did want to say, like, this is one of the books I've always kind of struggled with seeing its validity in Scripture, even though I know it's supposed to be there, but it's just a matter of me kind of getting to the place that I get it. To me, it's even clearer now for why it's in here, because it is such a reminder that even though they didn't follow people back home, God still showed his hand of favor here in the middle of Babylon. It's super cool.
Guys, that's Esther. We're down to one book of the Old Testament remaining.
What's his name, by the way?
Good old. Let's just see if we're even saying it correctly.
What if it really was Malachi?
Malachi, the Italian property. Oh,
yeah.
Guy.
Yeah, that'd be bad, because I know a lot of Malachi's. That'd be bad if they were all pronouncing it wrong. But yeah, man, it feels like season 6, man, we're almost at the end of the Old Testament. That's kind of crazy. It is. I wonder what New Testament Bend to the Bible episodes are going to look like. Probably.
I honestly have tried to wrap my head around how you unpack a gospel in a weekend. And y'all pray for us.
Yeah.
And by us, I mean...
I was going to say, big us there. We'll pray for you. We're here to help however we can. Yeah. Well, now's the part in our podcast here where we actually have some ads. not commercials. We don't call them commercials
commercials. What are we,
because that's
bunch
for
of
boomers. Yeah. Some unofficial sponsors. So let's see who our sponsors are today. Every week I'm terrified to reach into this bag. Ugh. Like I know it's probably not going to be alive.
Is it sharp? Does it
No,
bite?
I don't want that
Razor
one.
blades.
I don't think I want that one. Oh, definitely. Ugh. I don't want that. All right. What in the heck is this?
Those are ear.
Yeah, like
Those are for in-ears.
Yeah.
Oh. Whenever you don't feel like you can hear from the Lord well and need a little tune-up on your hearing.
No, one size doesn't fit all.
One size does not fit all. So, listen up. God's got something to say to you. Uh-oh.
I have what looks like a can of Bisto. Bisto. This is gravy granules, the nation's favorite. Just add boiling water.
Sick.
What nation?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, exactly. What nation is this favorite? Because I'm 47 and I've never heard of Bisto.
I know it's not this nation. Gravy
Um,
granules.
Best before end.
Yeah.
course.
Before the end of.
This is October 2022, so clearly somebody has not consumed
Sweet.
Bisto in its allotted time. But you know what? This is so it adds flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It adds flavor. So if you've got some gravy and you need some gravy granules for your flavor, I think a lot of people settle in life for a bland,
Yeah.
passive existence. When what you need is a little Bisto. For all those bland moments, make them Bisto moments. Bisto.
Yeah, I thought this was a gag for a second because I didn't feel anything, and then I was like, oh wait a minute, there is a tissue.
That's terrifyingly what I
Is-
thought it was going to be.
I was like, I don't want to open it up to see if it's used.
I'm going to.
But then part of me was
Yak
like,
on
well,
this
is
table.
it used? I have to know.
Hey Jason, how do you make that tissue dance?
You put a little in it.
We're not boomers.
What if that's used? You just put your face on that.
I didn't wash it.
Ugh.
It doesn't smell used.
Is that a Kleenex or a tissue?
It actually feels like it may be of a Kleenex because it definitely feels a little lotiony. Like that could definitely tell that this would
That's not lotion.
soothe my nose. Little snat.
Yeah.
It's not lotion.
It's not lotion. It's not lotion.
Totally snot.
It's not lotion.
Ugh.
You can have that.
Stop. Get.
Now your computer is inoperable.
Ew. Ugh.
You're
So
welcome.
good with the germs here. All right. Well, thanks for that.
So, and I did have one request before we end because I know do we need to do the doggy bag?
Yeah, we're going to hit the doggy bag.
Can we bring back Cringe the Bible briefly?
I think we should because there were some cringy moments. Esther's got some cringy moments.
Yeah.
I'd
You
love to
could-
hear your guys' thoughts.
You kick it off.
Okay, because mine is, and it's just, there's so many mentions of the, wait, how do you say it, Pastor Jeff? Eunuch. Eunuch. Yeah, I cringe every time one's mentioned because I'm like, this poor emasculated guy is just being paraded around by the king, and it's just a constant reminder of like, it's horrible, and I cringe every time.
And they all call him, all of them that. That's all they call. They're just. It's always like their name
Well,
and then
and there
the
was the
eunuch.
Bible says there's some that were born eunuchs and some that were made eunuchs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neither.
Which
one
one do
sound
you
like a good
pray
time.
to be? If you've got to be one, which one do you want?
I would rather be born and
Yeah.
not know better.
Maybe he's born with it.
He's born with it. Maybe.
maybe he's. Maybe he's not. Oh. That's right there. That's why.
Oh, wow.
That's what. Maybe he's not. Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, that's
It's not
pretty.
Maybelline. He was made that way.
Yeah, that's a cringe for sure.
So did you have a cringe?
I think for me the cringe is the, what did we decide, 400? Is that what it says? 400 women? It doesn't say. Ish. In the hundred. Let's go in the hundreds of women back to back.
Hundreds.
Disgusting.
Well over a year to get through.
I wish you hadn't said it like that.
What an endeavor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Probably really good at Scrabble at the end of all that, yeah.
Well,
Okay, all right.
So Caroline's favorite
Anyway,
section?
that would be my cringe. Do you have a cringe?
Well, it's not a cringe. I think it's awesome. Just the fact that Haman got impaled.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I want to see what somebody, not
Ah.
but I want to see what Haman,
Yeah.
impaling him on a 75-foot pole looked like.
Logistically, yeah, I'm like,
How do you get him up there?
yeah, that's really, like, it's not like they had cranes.
Yeah.
Drop them up there. I have a lot of questions. I don't know that I want the answers to any of them, but I do have questions. Okay, our last section, my least favorite name, the doggy bag. This is what we take away. Our biggest takeaways.
Yeah, what do you
I'm
take?
start calling it that. I get to name it whatever I want. I mean, I don't, but I get to just say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just call it the takeaway section. That's lame. I'll work on it. Anyway, but biggest takeaways. I think I'll start. Mine is, Pastor Jeff, you said in your sermon, you said when God becomes optional in one generation, he'll be absent in the next. And I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but that in my mind really clicked as something to remember, that because I think a lot of times we do things and, spiritual disciplines and all of that, and we're trying to like do things for ourselves and our generation and the people we see around us. But it's a good reminder that there are people to come after us that we didn't make sure that God's a priority in our lives as well. So I thought that was a good one.
Yeah. I guess that my takeaway was, I mean, I mentioned that I love chapter 4, verse 14, where Mordecai is reminding her, if you don't do this, relief will come from somewhere else. Because to me, it was just a strong reminder of all the opportunities that we get daily, even serving around the church, on the weekends or other ministries or opportunities during the day. There's always an opportunity to say yes. God's cause is not going to go undone, so it's always my opportunity to say yes. That's typically my takeaway with Esther. But this time around, probably was it number 2 of your takeaways? God's not in a hurry, is a great reminder when life gets chaotic. Remembering that God's not in a hurry, but His timing is perfect. That was a big one for me today.
No, my takeaway goes. There's so many things that I love that I saw in this story that I don't think I ever saw before. The fact that you may have forgotten God, but God's not forgotten you.
Yep.
That's a big one. But I do think the what one generation tolerates, the next embraces. Mm-hmm. And just again, it goes to what you said, Pastor Caroline, about making sure that I live in a way that my kids and my grandkids and their kids, that they have a strong foundation. That I'm, the Bible talks about how the righteous leave an inheritance to their children's children. Well, our inheritance is not just money.
Yeah.
It's legacy. It's integrity. And that I live in a way that they can build on what I've established. Mm-hmm. And if I get real loosey-goosey in my convictions, what can I expect of them? Mm-hmm. And I do think a lot of times kids zig when the parents zag. And so making sure that I make a priority what needs to be a priority, and that I don't fight battles that I shouldn't fight. And at the end of it, I'm showing my kids what a genuine relationship with the Lord looks like. Not a legalistic thing, not a you got to do this because, but what a privilege to be loved by the Lord and to love Him back and live out of that. I think really sets the next generation up to stand on our shoulders and do more than we could ever imagine. That's mine.
Good. That's good. Well, we've done it again. Another episode 2 down. Well, guys, if you're watching or listening, you can go to bingethebible.org for additional resources. You can catch up on all the sermons, all the podcasts you might have missed, any other kind of resources. We have reading plans that go along with each book as well. We'd love to have you catch up there. But for now, thanks for sticking with us through Esther, and we'll see you next time for maybe Malachi, maybe Malachi. Guess we'll find out next week.